Hey, what's happening? This is Carroll, host of Turn Up the Volume podcast. And listen, I want to let y'all know something. You can follow us on many different platforms. You can follow me on Facebook at Deontay J. Carroll Sr. You can also follow me on Twitter at Deontay J. Carroll, no apostrophe. Also, I'm on Instagram at Deontay Carroll, all one word, no apostrophe. And lastly, you want to follow me on YouTube at Deontay Carroll because I post all of my episodes and post all of my shows from the podcast on my YouTube page. So if you want to continue to stay connected, make sure you like, share, and subscribe and follow me on all of my social media platforms. And remember, until next time, keep that volume turned up. Peace. Be blessed. Good evening. Tonight's episode is dedicated to a very important person who has played a tremendous role in my life. Her name is Doria Johnson. Doria Johnson was my undergrad professor who taught my African American history class while I was at Strayer University. It is through Doria Johnson where I met tonight's guest, Mr. Keith Beauchamp. Doria Johnson spent a great deal of her life fighting and trying to let the world know about the wrongful lynching of her great-great-grandfather, Anthony Crawford, back in Abbeville. Tonight, this episode is for you, Doria. May you rest in peace and love and power. God bless. Good evening. Today is March the 5th, 2021, and I am excited. I tell you, I'm excited because I have a very special guest with me today. Listen, we are 10 episodes in of our podcast, Turn Up the Volume podcast. And like I said before, I talk about an array of different things: religion, politics, social issues, current events, documentaries. I want my show to be a one-stop shop to it. You can come here and each week, you don't even know what you're getting or what you get yourself into, but I want to make sure that my people are empowered, they have information, they have everything that they need to do better, to be edified, and to grow and continue to do better, and to have better, and to experience better. And so tonight is no different. Tonight I have an amazing human being that I met. If you watch the opening of my show, I met through my undergrad professor who, as she would say, she's going on to be with the ancestors, Brother Keith Beauchamp. And I want to read a little bit of his bio. Keith Beauchamp, he's an award-winning filmmaker. He attended Southern University in Baton Rouge, where he studied criminal justice with the intention of becoming a civil rights attorney. In the fall of 1997, Beauchamp relocated from Baton Rouge, Louisiana to New York. During the day, he spent his evenings doing research and reaching out to anyone who might have information on the Emmett Till case, a story told by Beauchamp when he was just 10 years old. Told to Beauchamp when he was just 10 years old. It was at this young age that Beauchamp saw a Jet magazine that contained a picture of Emmett Till's dead body and was told the story behind Till's murder. On May 10, 2004, the United States Department of Justice reopened this 50-year-old murder case, citing Beauchamp's documentary, The Untold Story of Emmett Louis Till, as both a major factor in their decision and the starting point for their investigation. In May of 2005, Emmett's body was exhumed, and in 2006, the FBI turned over the evidence to the appropriate district attorney in Mississippi. Sadly to say, in February 2007, a Mississippi grand jury made a decision to indict the remaining suspects in the case. That same year, Beauchamp began his collaboration with the FBI's new Civil Rights Cold Case Initiative, producing documentaries on other unsolved civil rights murders in hopes of helping federal agents with their investigations that could lead to bringing remaining perpetrators to justice. Beauchamp is the former executive producer and host of Investigation Discovery's award-winning crime reality series, The Injustice Files, and currently the producer of the upcoming feature film Till, which is being co-produced by Fred Zolo and Whoopi Goldberg and Barbara Broccoli. He is also a frequent lecturer at colleges and universities around the country. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't even want to waste too much time. I'm going to go ahead and bring him on here. I'm going to take him off mute. I want to introduce to others, none other than Mr. Keith Beauchamp. How you doing, Keith?
How you doing, brother Deontay? You didn't have to read that whole bio.
Look,
but
I want the people to know who you are, man.
Look, I really appreciate you, man, and I really want to say what a great way to pay homage to our dear friend Doria Johnson. She would be very, very proud of you, man, and I just wanted to let you know that. Because we lost a great person who influenced both of us, and to have her here now has been the hardest thing that I have to deal with throughout this journey. But I just wanted you to know, man, I'm proud of you, and I know she would be proud of you for having a show like this, so that the voiceless can.
Yeah, I miss her so much, man, because I often wonder what she would say about what's going on today as it relates to the insurrection, as it relates to the Trump era and the different things. Because one thing about Professor Johnson, she did not bite her tongue, and I was glad that she was such an amazing figure, man. Like, she was an amazing figure. This picture was the last picture that I took with her before she passed away. And this picture, Keith, it was at the opening of the Smithsonian African American Museum here in D.C., and she happened to be here. And of course, she was on the front line. She was letting everybody know what the truth was, and still preaching truth to power. And we're going to miss her greatly, man. We're going to miss her greatly. And I hope that she's smiling down, watching this, and proud, and just saying, go ahead and get them, and go ahead and put that information out there. But nonetheless, Keith, you just like Dory, you have spent a great deal of your time on this earth trying to seek justice in many different ways. One of which is the case of Emmett Till. Some people may know about Emmett Till. Some people may not know about Emmett Till. But you have a story behind what got you involved in the case of Emmett Till. So tell us how you got involved in Emmett Till. What was your first exposure to Emmett Till? And go ahead and bring us up to speed about the facts about Emmett Till's murder.
Absolutely. I want to apologize to the viewing audience right now because I know we had some technical difficulties earlier, but I'm hoping you're able to see me well. But it's not that you need to see me. It's about the words that I will be expressing to you. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Well, Brother Deontay, my journey with Emmett Till started when I was just 10 years old. I was in my parents' study. I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And while I was in the study, I was going through old vintage magazines that they kept for my sister and I. And I recall pulling out a Jet magazine and opening up the pages. And on one side of the page, there's this angelic face of this young little boy. And on this other side of the page, there's this horrific face of this monster. And I just didn't know I didn't know, how should I say it? I did not know what I was looking at the time. And I can recall my parents walking by the study, and my mother glanced at me. She looked in, and she saw me with my mouth open. So she walked in, and she looked over my shoulder, and she saw what I was looking at. And I can recall her looking at my father. He walks in. He did the same thing, looked over my shoulder, and they looked at each other. And they said to they said to me, or they said to themselves, I think it's time to tell them the story. And so they sat me down right then and there and began to tell me the story of Emmett Till. But throughout my life, the name kept resurfacing. When I got into high school, I was interracially dating. The first thing my parents would tell me before I left the house at night was, don't let what happened to Emmett Till happen to you. So it became an educational tool to teach me about the racism that
Wow.
still exists in this country today. But it wasn't until 2 weeks before my high school graduation where I had my real run-in with racism when I was assaulted by an undercover police officer for dancing with a white classmate of mine. And that's what prompted me in wanting to fight injustice. And I felt that the only way that I could truly fight injustice is by becoming a part of the system, which is why I went to Southern University of Baton Rouge in hopes of becoming a civil rights attorney. And so that was my early introduction to the Till case and my wake-up call, and putting me, I guess, putting me on this path of my calling in life. And so when I'm 2 weeks, I said 2 weeks, in my junior year of college, my best friend actually moved to New York City. He began working with his sister who had a film production company. And I was invited to come down and hang out with him one summer. And I took off for a semester, came in the summer of '96, and was blown away by the work they were doing. And that's when I decided that I would take the story of Emmett Till after we had a company meeting one evening. And I was asked, was there a story that I would like to tell as a feature film? What would that be? And of course, the first thing that came to my mind was the story of Emmett Till.
Oh, let me tell. Wow. So take us into your research. Tell us about the events surrounding Emmett Till. Was he from Mississippi? Was he
Okay.
visiting?
Well, the year was 1955. The day was August 28th, when he was murdered. But Emmett Till went down to the Mississippi Delta to visit his southern relatives from Chicago. Within a week's time, Emmett is abducted from his great uncle's home, tortured, and then murdered for one of the oldest taboos of the South, addressing a white woman in public. Two men were soon arrested, Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam, but later acquitted in a court of law by an all-white, all-male jury. 4 months after this dreadful crime, Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam would confess to the murder of Emmett Lewis Till to a reporter by the name of William Bradford Huey, who would then publish their story in Look magazine. And of course, this sent shockwaves around the country. Many felt it would cause a change that we're still, unfortunately, fighting for. And so that's the story. My involvement in the story, I began investigating the case in early '96, and I discovered evidence that was not just 2 people involved with the kidnapping and murder of Emmett Till, but 14 people I was able to identify as being involved with the kidnapping and the murder. 5 of these people, unfortunately, was Black men who we believe was forced to participate in the crime. And so this is the evidence that I brought forward in 2004, as well as other things, and I'm sure we'll get to some of those things as we move forward with this interview. But this is the evidence that I brought forward to get the case reopened in 2004. And so this has been a journey for over half of my life, been fighting to get justice for Emmett Till, as well as trying to help other family members get justice, in their cases as well. And so it's amazing to be sitting here with you talking about this, and it's moving to know that. And I'm gonna have to say I'm flustered because I'm thinking about Doria as I'm speaking, and so it's really moving to be here and talking to you tonight because it's an emotional moment in time for me, thinking about Doria D. But this has been my life, Brother Deontay, working on this case, hoping to get justice for the families, keeping a promise I gave the late Mrs. Mamie Till Mobley, who I call Mother Mobley, who was a good friend, confidant, my teacher, my mentor. And so this is something that I had to pursue. I feel that is my obligation, and I'm going to continue to do it until justice prevails.
So Keith, walk us through a little bit. So he's visiting. You might got to turn your audio down on your side, Keith. By the way, and so he's visiting relatives in Mississippi. We understand, for those who know the story of Emmett Till, we understand he goes into the shop with some of his relatives. If I'm not mistaken, Simeon Wright, right, who passed away not too long ago. Simeon
Yes.
Wright. Let's see. There he is, right there, Simeon Wright, who you
Yes,
say is a
sir.
mentor of yours, right? And so Simeon Wright, and I
Yes,
can't go ahead.
yes, Brother Deontay. I mean, there's many people who have, been great mentors to me. And Mr. Simeon Wright, as you mentioned, was a huge blow. We lost Mr. Wright. And of course, following Mr. Wright's death, we lost our dear sister, Doria Johnson.
Yeah.
And so, yes, Mr. Wright was at the store with Emmett, as well as three other relatives and friends. And he actually, Emmett goes into the store, goes in to purchase bubble gum, and Simeon is then sent in behind him to make sure that he doesn't say anything out of line. We have to understand. Let me put it in context. Emmett was from Chicago once again.
Right.
He did not truly understand Florida, and so this is why his southern cousin Simeon Wright was sent in after him to make sure he didn't say anything out of line to the woman, Carolyn Bryan, who was the store owner's wife at the moment, at that time,
And this is the
who
store, correct? This is the
was,
store, correct?
I'm sorry, yes, that's the store,
Okay.
the Bryan store. And Emmett was purchasing the bubble gum from Carolyn Bryan. They have this encounter. Simeon goes in, they're walking out. Emmett turns around and tells her bye. And as he walks out of the doors of the store, Carolyn Bryan is coming from the petition, behind the petition, and she's walking out directly behind them as well. As she reached the porch of the store on the exterior side of I'm sorry, at the exterior, or
Right.
should I say, the exterior part of the store,
Right.
as soon as she walked out and she was on the porch of the store, Emmett turned around and wolf whistled at her. She then immediately goes to her car, grabs a gun, and of course, all the kids who was there jumped in their car and they drove away. 3 days later, men come to the house, as well as Carolyn Bryan. Although a lot of critics would say she wasn't there, she was there. And they abduct Emmett and take him away from the home, city in the Delta, Glendora, Mississippi, where he's tortured for a period of time. When men get together and they decide they're gonna murder him or kill him, so they load him back up in the truck. They drive to I'm sorry, that was Drew, Mississippi, not Glendora. They load him up into a truck. They take him from Drew, Mississippi to Glendora, Mississippi, where one of the men, white men who were present, goes and he retrieves a cotton gin fan from the cotton gin that is in Glendora. And he takes the gin fan and back to, of course, the lynching party where they shoot Emmett in the head and they tie, or should I say tether, this cotton gin fan with barbed wire around his neck.
And I don't
Emmett
know
is
if this is the
tossed
cotton
into
gin
the
fan, but this is,
river.
I don't know if it's, I don't know if this is the exact one, but this is what a cotton gin fan looks like, y'all. Like this is the extent
Brother
of what they
Deontay,
went
that's
through.
the exact one.
Okay,
It
okay. See,
weighed
look,
about 70,
look. I try to do
it
my
weighed
homework,
about
man.
70 pounds. I see.
Yeah.
We have a small delay, so if I sound strange, that's the reason why.
It's cool. Go ahead. I
Um,
got you.
but they tethered Emmett, tethered the cotton gin fan around Emmett's neck with barbed wire, and then they tossed him into Black Bayou, which ultimately takes Emmett's body to the Tallahatchie River, where his body is found 3 days later by a white fisherman.
Now it's interesting to me too, Keith, because um, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was your documentary that I was watching, where it said they tried to hurry up and to have the funeral. They tried to hurry up and bury his
Yes.
body. Um, but what happened to where that funeral was interrupted and his mother was able to take his body back to Chicago?
Well, of course, when Emmett was murdered, the sheriff, H.C. Strider, which is known to be the racist sheriff you would see in the film, of Tallahatchie County, he actually, when the body was discovered and Moses Wright, Emmett's great uncle, went on the crime scene and he identified the body, he told Moses Wright that he needed to bury that body before the sun was down. And of course, I want your audience to understand the time. You know, this is before the civil rights movement. We're talking about the Delta of Mississippi. The Delta of Mississippi and Mississippi alone was known to be the free state, which means that anything transpired in the state of Mississippi, no outside influences could come in to intervene. And so this is the atmosphere in which Emmett Till is murdered. And so when Moses Wright is told to bury this body, of course, he was hesitant, but he understood what it meant if he did not bury that body, what could possibly happen to him and his family. So he went on, and they had a somewhat of a funeral for Emmett, and they actually dug a hole and was getting ready to lower the body into the ground when another sheriff of LaFleur County, Greenwood, Mississippi, George Smith, came out and stopped of the outside influences somehow cracking this cotton curtain or this brick wall, I would call it. And they were able to convince the state officials to allow the body to be shipped back to Chicago. But when they made that decision, um, it was still a difficult task to get the body not only back to Chicago, but to get Mother Mobley an opportunity to actually view the body, because they actually put the Mississippi State seal on the casket that was returned, which forbade anyone from opening up that casket. And so, of course, Mother Mobley, when she retrieved the body in Chicago, and the body was taken to A.A. Rayner Funeral Home, they were trying to convince her to not open the casket. And of course, she didn't want to hear that. You know, she wanted to know if it was her baby in this coffin, in this casket that was returned. And there was no way of her actually knowing unless she opened this casket. And of course, it had the Mississippi State seal on it. And A. Rayner, you know, he was upset because he wanted to help her, but he understood that if he opened the casket, he could possibly lose his license. But what ends up happening, he defies the odds and he makes a courageous decision himself by opening the casket so the mother of Emmett Till could see what's in this box or casket, whatever you want to call it. And of course, when they opened the casket, Mother Mobley was shocked about what she saw, and she was able to identify Emmett. And it was at this viewing of her son's, body where she made the courageous decision to have an open casket funeral so the world could see what happened to her son.
Right, very
And let me
courageous.
just explain how important this moment is. This moment was so important because Mother Mobley was 33 years old. She was 33 years old at the time. And so she's making this courageous decision in 1955. There were many murders that took place during that time, many lynchings that took place during that time. But what set this away from all the others was the fact that Mother Mobley made that courageous decision to have an open casket funeral so the world could see what happened to her son. She had also allowed photographers from Jet Magazine and Chicago Defender to come in and take photographs of her son. And the reason why I'm mentioning this to you, we're talking about how pictures and how things go viral today. She was doing, she was using what we would later discover to be social media, I guess, in a way, some form of social media back in 1955. And that's what's woke that was something. The photograph is what woke the sleeping giant of Black people across the globe.
Yeah, it was very courageous of her to make that decision. Keith, we got a little echo in your background a little bit. It was a very courageous decision to for her to do that, to show her son like that. And it's amazing because one of the things I think about is partly as to why they probably didn't want her to show his body is because it was very telling of the wickedness of America, and that if white supremacy and racism can do this to a child, nobody else is off limits. And so the amazing thing is, she talked about in her documentary. She talked about, if I'm not mistaken, that she could smell his body blocks away before she got to the funeral home. Like, as a parent, it just bothers me that as a parent, you send your child to be with relatives down south, not knowing that your child is not going to come back. And the crazy thing is, Keith, my oldest son is sitting here with me now, and I'm teaching him how to work the production and do different things of that nature. I can't even fathom one of my children, going out of town, coming back, and then they're coming back not alive, and I had to identify their body. And the crazy thing about it is his body was so badly damaged. Keith, how was she able to recognize his body? Was there like a mark on his body? Was there something that he had on that she was able to identify him with? Like, how? Because if we look at the pictures, he was mutilated. Like, how was she able to identify him?
Well, I'll have to say the first point of discovery of Emmett's body when it was pulled from the river, Moses Wright was able to identify Emmett by the ring that was on his finger. And the
Okay.
ring was given to Emmett before he left for his trip to the Mississippi Delta. And so the ring was of his father. It was his father's ring, I should say, and it had the initials LT. So when the body was pulled from the river, of course, this is something that was discovered by Moses Wright, who actually saw Emmett wearing this ring before. And he actually allowed Simeon Wright, our good friend Simeon Wright, to wear it that summer. So that was the first point of identification of Emmett, of knowing that the body that was pulled from the river was that of Emmett Till. And so when the body arrived in Chicago, although the ring wasn't present at the time because it was being held for evidence, although the ring wasn't present, Mother Mobley knew her son. She knew every part of him like any mother would know their child. And so she was quite shocked, of course, and that's saying it lightly, about what she saw. But it was just, when we spoke to each other about that moment, yes, she was grieving, but it was something in her that was telling her that she had to really become courageous. And she always saw Emmett being somewhat of a sacrificial lamb for man's liberation. And so even at that moment of grief, she felt this energy that she had to be strong for everyone. And that's when she made that decision that she wanted the world to see what happened to her son, Emmett. And so, and you also had Mr. Mobley there, and I would be remiss not mentioning him. And that was her boyfriend at the time, who she later married. And Mr. Mobley cut Emmett Till's hair. And so he recognized the haircut that he gave Emmett. And so that was the assurance that the body that what they were looking at was in fact Emmett Till.
It's amazing. So his murder, his lynching, would you agree? It kind of sparked the civil rights movement, right?
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely, brother Deontay. And you know what? I want to say this, and I thank you for the segue because I always say to myself, I need to be more clear about putting Emmett's story in its proper context and history.
That's why
You know,
we
I
here,
was
brother.
young when we first met. You know, I was young at that time. And so, you know, there's a lot of things that come with wisdom and age. And there were things that Mother Mobley was telling me at the time in my early 20s that I didn't realize I was actually, I didn't understand it at that time. You know, what young kid would understand that? Because I was a kid practically. But anyway,
Yeah.
when I say Emmett's story needs to be put in its proper context, I want to lay it out for you. In 1954, Brown versus Board of Education takes place when the NAACP wins the landmark decision. It was the biggest landmark decision ever won by the NAACP. Their next big thing was anti-lynching legislature. All right.
Right.
So out of the Brown versus Board of Education, you had the rise or the formation of the Citizens Council of the South, in particular Mississippi. The Citizens Council was against integration. They were against African Americans utilizing their right to vote. They were against to race mixing. They were against to all these social ills that we've been faced with over, years and years of suffering in this country, I should say. And so what ends up happening, they give this Black Monday speech on the day that Brown versus Board of Education, the Brown versus Board of Education win is announced. And they also vow to bring a reign of terror throughout the state of Mississippi, and in particular the Delta. All right. So what ends up happening on May 10th, I think it's May 7th. I may get these dates wrong, so my audience, please excuse me. On May 7th, 1955, you have the first of what they call the Trinity killings of 1955.
Okay.
You have the murder of Reverend George W. Lee out of Belzoni, Mississippi. He's an NAACP official. He also is a member of the Regional Negro Leadership Council. He is shot on his way home from a speaking engagement one evening by members of the White Citizens Council for trying to register Black voters. Now, get this. Reverend George W. Lee was also the first registered voter, Black voter in Humphreys County. So this murder occurs, and then right after this murder, you have the murder of Lamar Smith that happens in Brookhaven, Mississippi. This is in August, 2 weeks before Emmett's arrival into the Delta. Lamar Ditley Smith he's an NAACP member. He's also a civil rights leader in his community. He's a voters' rights advocate. He was known for registering Black voters. And on this day, he was assassinated on the courthouse lawn in broad daylight in front of about 100 people. No one was ever brought to justice for both of these murders. And so this is the atmosphere Emmett Till walks into. So when his murder occurs, Emmett And Emmett instantly becomes the poster child to the anti-lynching movement. And everyone galvanized behind the efforts. Many civil rights organizations, not just the NAACP. You had outrage from around the world coming in about the death of Emmett Till. And this is why it's so important to understand why we hear people when they talk about the Emmett Till case, why we hear them talk about Emmett being the catalyst. Now, what's been missing in many history books, this direct connection between Emmett and what we believe, not shouldn't say believe, but what we know to be the civil rights movement. And this link becomes from, is connected with Rosa Parks. 4 days before she made her courageous decision not to get up from her seat on that bus in Montgomery, Alabama, she attends a Till rally at Dexter Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. The rally is being officiated over by young Dr. Martin Luther King. Well, he was Martin Luther King at that time. He was 26 years old. And the person who was hosting and speaking at the rally was Dr. T.R.M. Howard. And I'm saying these names for a reason. You have to read on Dr. T.R.M. Howard. You'll be very surprised about a lot of these sheroes and heroes that we don't know about. And so it was at this Till rally where Rosa Parks had in her head that she must do something courageous. And she did that 4 days later on that bus in Montgomery, Alabama. That's your direct link to the mobilization of the civil rights movement and why we call Emmett the sacrificial lamb of the movement, the catalyst of the civil rights movement.
So here's my question. Listen to what you just said. Anybody who would look at this story, they would say Emmett Till. He was what, 14 when he had his life taken away from him. He had a full life ahead of him. He didn't even get a chance to really get into high school and to go off to get married, had children, do different things. Do you think that his death was, in vain? Like, do you think that?
No, I don't think his death was in vain. He couldn't die in vain, and that's what Mother Mobley spent her whole life for 47 years to make sure that people understand Emmett's story and its importance to man's liberation. And Brother Deontay, that's what I was missing. That was the message that she was trying to get me to understand.
Right.
She often said to me, before we got off the phone at night or when we depart from each other after seeing each other, just before I would leave, she would stop me and she would say, Keith, you must continuously tell Emmett's story until man's consciousness is risen. Only then there will be justice for Emmett Till. For so long, I would, this, if you want to call it, or the statement would pop up in my mind, but I just never knew what she was trying to tell me until later on as I grew older and I grew into knowing the story even more. We now know, and it's not something to debate, but we now know if not for the murder of Emmett Till, the civil rights movement would not appear to be, what we know it to be. And I'll say that because I still have hope that the civil rights movement would have come along, but would have had the momentum that it had?
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
And so I'm only speaking from the facts. What we do know that the murder of this 14-year-old child woke the sleeping giant of Black people from around the world. And people from around the world began to galvanize and to mobilize behind this movement. And of course, Emmett's story, Emmett's case have had a profound impact on our country, past and current and present, I should say. And so this is something that we must understand. I mean, we've all been longing for this Great movement, a new movement to come out. We all got excited by Black Lives Matter movement and things of that nature. But if we could honestly say to ourselves that the civil rights movement was the greatest and most successful movement ever created by citizens of this country that galvanized change, then we must look at the murder of Emmett Till and understand his death and the actions of those who had, who pushed the movement forward. And I'm speaking of course, Mother Mobley and the actions of the NAACP at that time. This is very important. I don't believe that many of us truly understand this story, but this is what Mother Mobley was trying to instill in me in understanding that she had the blueprint, or she have the blueprint to man's liberation.
This is what I want to ask you while it's on my mind, because um, every generation, what I'm realizing is every generation in some way, shape, or form or another is being exposed to the story of Emmett Till. Just a few months ago, there was a series on Netflix. I don't know if you saw Lovecraft Country. And when I saw
Yes.
Lovecraft Country, I thought about you. I swear to God, I did. I thought about you because they had an episode or two where it focused on Emmett Till. And they wrote him into that series where you saw him alive. You saw the gestures with the necktie in the famous picture that his mother took. And I forgot the nickname that they called him by. But you get to the point to where he's best friends with the little girl, and then he goes off and they're playing the Ouija board. Is he going to make it back? And the funeral happens, and just that visual of the funeral stood out to me so much because it was almost like I don't even think it probably told it perfectly what really happened that day at the funeral. But what was your thoughts about Lovecraft Country and talking about the Emmett Till murder?
Well, Brother Deontay, I get excited, to be honest with you, when I see Emmett Till a part of popular culture, per se.
Okay.
This is a story that people have spoke about behind closed doors, and unfortunately, it's been very difficult to get this story out to the masses. This has been part of my journey as a filmmaker, trying to get the story of Emmett Till out to the masses so they can understand his case. But this is also a story that was taboo, and many probably consider it still taboo because it deals with the sex and race issue, a problem that we have even today talking about in the open forum. But I get excited once again when I see these things because I know that I've been able to do my job and keep my promise by getting the story out there. And I'm not taking all the credit. There's many of us who are out here trying to bring or to keep Emmett's name and his story in America's consciousness. And so to see these things, I get extremely excited. But I do want you to understand, and your listeners to understand as well, those who are watching, it is important to, once again, to really establish Emmett's story in its proper context in American history. Emmett is the Anne Frank of Black America. His death reminds us of grave injustice as well as hope and change. And this is what we have to continue to teach our youth and to teach the people around us so we can have a better understanding about his murder and the backdrop from 1955, which is similar, or I would even say a mirror image to what we just experienced in the last couple of years. And so this is why it's so important to understand the story because the fight that we continue to fight is nothing different. The social ills of today may have cosmetically changed, but they remain the same issues that we were fighting in 1955. So for someone like myself, who have been a student of history because of the work that I do, and this is on my mind every day, to now finally understand that history can repeat itself in my lifetime, it's a troubling, thing to think about. And we all should be on guard and ready to fight and continue the good fight, I should say, because, it's a shame that we're living in this country and we're still fighting the same social ills that has plagued us for generations and generations.
Moses Wright. That was Emmett's uncle, correct? Or was it his great uncle?
His great uncle.
Great uncle. That's what he was staying with. If I'm not mistaken, is this the house that they were staying in? That Moses Wright owned?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's the house that they took Emmett Till from. Moses Wright, and I believe this is Moses and his son Simeon, if I'm not mistaken, in this picture. Moses.
You're correct on that as well.
Moses, see, I told you, I'm one of Doria's students, man. I do my homework, boy. Moses, he was very pivotal in the case because back then it was almost like a no-brainer to not testify against a white person who for a fact committed a crime. This particular picture here, why is that picture so important?
The picture is so important because Moses Wright defied all the odds that day. He did something that no Black Mississippian ever did, which was to go into the court of law and point out those tormentors, those murderers who actually killed Emmett Till, his great nephew, and he did that because he knew himself he had to make a stand to cause change in his own way. And it was a courageous decision because many people have tried to do this, but they never lived. He did it and he lived. And it was a very important part of the trial in 1955, although justice still befell us.
It's so interesting. So, okay. J.W. Milam and Roy Bryant, those are the two gentlemen who took Emmett Till, took his body, and beat him and did different things and took his life. What happened to Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam after that case?
Well, after the case, Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam and his family, his wife, Carolyn Bryan, as well as Juanita Milam, they were labeled as outcasts. Nobody wanted to be around them. In fact, the Black community got together and they began to protest at all the stores that the family owned throughout the Delta. So they were forced to actually shut down. And it's interesting that I'm talking to you about this because these are very important things and tactics that we should still be using today, regardless of people thinking these are old tactics or not. They worked in 1955 and throughout the 60s and into the 70s, and we should be still out there on the front lines protesting every chance that we get these institutions that don't allow or treat these institutions that treat us well, I should say. So the Black community got together, and this is the Delta of Mississippi, so I can't even imagine how amazing this actually looked. But they band together and they began to protest all the stores in the Delta that J.W. Milam and Roy Bryant owned. And then later on, of course, they were forced to leave the community. They moved out the community, went to Texas, I believe, and one stayed in Mississippi for some time. They both died in the 80s of cancer.
And now, Carolyn Bryan, is she still alive today?
Yes, she is.
Okay, and which one is she in this picture? Is she...
Carolyn Bryan, from what I'm looking, she's next to the guy with the cigar. That's the best way to describe her.
So that's the one with...
She has the dark hair, by the way.
Okay, so that's the lady that claimed that Emmett whistled at her and she was in the store, took his money that day, and told her husband, I guess, and they ended up taking him. She's still alive. Why? So the case that took place, that you were responsible. So first, talk to us about your documentary, because you did the documentary, and it opened up the Emmett Till case again, right? It opened
Yes.
up, but for some reason, nothing happened as relates to getting justice. What was the rationale as to why there was no justice? Nobody was arrested. Nobody was charged. Nobody was, held accountable for his
Yes.
murder.
The name of the documentary is The Untold Story of Emmett Lewis Till. It was produced. It took me 9 years to produce it, I should say. Financed by my parents, who were my first executive producers
That's
of my
love.
film project. The greatest thing about it, it led to the reopening of the case in 2004. In 2004, as the investigation went forward, I was involved with the investigation myself, worked alongside of the FBI and the case, the FBI and DOJ and so on. And basically, the FBI followed up on all my leads, and there were two people who were still living at that time who could be prosecuted for the kidnapping and murder of Emmett Till. And these two people, one was Carolyn Bryan, the white woman we just spoke about, who Emmett Till whistled at in 1955. The second person was Henry Lee Loggins, one of the black men who we believe were forced to participate in the crime. And so the case then goes to a grand jury, and a grand jury decides not to indict Carolyn for the kidnapping and murder, as well as, of course, Henry Lee Loggins.
And she's still
And
around
this
to this
this
day.
takes place in 2007. The grand jury hearing was 2007, and they make this statement saying that it was insufficient evidence. They passed a no true bill claiming that was insufficient evidence. And this is why I'm so excited to be on your podcast this evening, because I now can actually speak on the facts. But let's move forward to 2017. In 2017, a book written by Dr. Tim Tyson, The Blood of Emmett Till, was released and was published and released, I should say. And in this book, the book alleges that Carolyn Bryant confessed to fabricating her story in 1955. And so, this is what launched a new investigation, of course, because when I heard this information that Carolyn Bryant has
Yeah.
confessed that she fabricated her story, the first thing I did was read the book. Second, I discovered that she had memoirs that she was writing and planning to write a book of her own, but they were not to be released until 2036, way after she's gone.
After she probably
And
long gone.
so, using this information, I, my, I myself, and I just, I don't know why I'm talking this way. It's just the feedback. The delay is killing me over here. But myself and Simeon Wright went to the DA, reached out to the DA, I should say, and we encouraged him to reopen the case based on these new findings. And he, in fact, reopened the case. So that was 2017. Now it's 2021, and we have not heard anything from the local DA since that time. And so everything is in his hand in terms of making the decision. Should we go forward with trying to indict Carolyn Bryant, or I should say, impelling a grand jury so a decision can be made if Carolyn Bryan would be indicted or not? And so let's go back now. Now that I got the current stuff out the way, some of the things that I brought forward to DOJ when I first met with them just before the case was reopened. Not only did I identify 14 people being involved with the kidnapping and murder, and of course, two of them were still alive, I also discovered that Carolyn Bryant, and of course, Carolyn Bryant, Roy Bryant, J.W. Milam also picked up two other kids that night. They assaulted one kid in the store that was just visiting, had just come back from Chicago. He was in the store and he was, with his mother bragging about how he had a good time in Chicago. What happens? Roy Bryant overhears this. He runs over to see this kid. He roughs him up in the store, assault the kid in front of his mother. And Carolyn runs out and says, "That's not the right boy. Leave him alone." This is on the day Emmett Till was abducted. Let me just point that out to you again.
Hmm.
So that evening, just before they went after Emmett, there was another kid walking alongside of the highway. And Roy is in the cab of the truck, J.W. Milam and Carolyn, they're all in the cab of the truck. They had a black field hand on the back of the truck by the name of Johnny B. Washington. And they pull alongside of this kid and they yell at Johnny B to grab him because, of course, in their mind, it's Emmett Till. So Johnny B grabs the kid, tosses him on the back of the truck, holds his hand up to the cab of the truck. Carolyn Bryan turns around and says, "That's not the nigger, throw him back." He's thrown off the moving truck. I locate these guys and they become a part of the investigation. So in my mind, and of course, everyone who's an attorney, we know she was at that home that night. We know she was the one that identified Emmett when he was abducted. And so that was never a problem to even, to think that she was involved because everybody knew it at the time. In fact, a warrant was issued for her arrest, which was never served to her because the sheriff at the time said she had children to take care of. That
Oh,
was his
stop.
answer, and that's
Oh,
why
stop.
she wasn't served this warrant. And so this is the stuff that I brought forward to the DOJ next to I was, given the murder weapon, the location of the murder weapon, which we were able to retrieve, which is one of the other reasons why we exhumed Emmett Till's body in 2005. His body was exhumed to give his, to in fact identify him as being Emmett because there were still rumors that the body that was pulled from the river in 1955 was not that of Emmett Till. Even the races in 1955 came out, and even the sheriff, I should say, made the statement that this was something that was co-opted by the NAACP, that they were able to locate a cadaver, and they brought this cadaver and planted it in the river, and so on. So you had all these craziness happening in 1955, and Mother Mobley wanted to exhume her son back then, but they would not allow her to do it. And so that was the first thing that was in my mind when we got the case reopened, that this needed to be done to identify Emmett once and for all so that, we won't have these critics out there. And secondly, we had to do ballistics on the murder weapon that was found. And so, again, we had all this overwhelming evidence. Carolyn Bryant should have been indicted for culpable negligence, I believe. And for this means that Carolyn Bryant had to understand the danger Emmett Till would be in and did nothing to stop it. She really didn't have to physically be there. She only had to have the knowledge that something would happen to Emmett Till. And in fact, we know this to be true. We know she was at the house. We know she was, involved with the assault and the kidnapping, identifying these other two kids. We really felt that we were going to get justice, and of course, it was given to the local DA who present this case into a jury of their peers, and unfortunately, they decide not to indict her. And so this is why I'm continuing this journey. Of course, I have a lot of emotions running through me on why this woman was not indicted, but I think you're all, it's just unfortunate because we have all this overwhelming evidence against her, and and now we're waiting for with the case now.
I'll say this, Keith. If if they can get Bill Cosby at this stage of his life, they can get Carolyn Bryan. Only in America can you have, as Paul Mooney would
I have
say,
one.
huh? Oh no, only as in America, as Paul Mooney would say, white folks have the complexion for the protection for the collection. Only in America can you be a white person and commit such a heinous crime or be a part of a heinous crime and then be given a rain check in terms of when you'll be held accountable. We see that in Emmett Till's case. We see it with the insurrection. We see it in the murder of MLK, Malcolm X, all this kind of stuff. But one last question before I let you go. Do you see any hope in the future of somebody being held accountable in your lifetime?
Um, I have to hold on to believe, in light of the tragedies that we have seen in the past year, Emmett's name always metaphorically comes back to fruition. So he's on everyone's mind. And right now we have a petition that's circulating on social media. We're asking everyone to please sign this petition, which we hope will encourage or urge, strongly urge to do their job and make sure justice prevails in this case. But in the words of Brother Amiri Baraka, there's no justice that sustains justice for Emmett that remains to be seen. But we need to make sure that we get the truth out there to the masses so that people would understand what actually transpired in the summer of 1955. That means more to me, than anything, that the story is told right. You yourself met some of the witnesses that I have interviewed who confided in me to tell their stories. And so I'm just their mouthpiece. I just want to do what I set out to do and what I promised them that I would do is get the truth out to the masses. That's what Mother Mobley wanted. That's what Mr. Simeon Wright wanted, as well as the other witnesses that justice will prevail in some way. But I do hope it will be the courtroom justice that we've been looking for, yes.
Oh, you have a movie out called coming out where you said Whoopi Goldberg was one of the producers, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it's called Till. I read it in your bio. When could we expect that film to be released? There.
Alfred Zolo, who produced Missing, the producer of the Bond, James Bond franchise, as well as known for 17 years of my life. They have worked alongside of me to get the film to this point where we're at right now. And we'll be making some announcements soon. But the film will be produced this summer, upcoming summer, and released the following year. I don't know the exact date as of yet, but it's being directed by Chinoya Chiku, who who directed and produced and wrote, I should say, and wrote the movie Clemency. And so I am truly excited to get to this point because this is going to be my second attempt to get the facts out there to the masses if the courtroom fails us this time.
Well, I tell you this: whenever you complete that project, you always got a spot right here on Turn Up the Volume to come back to have an interview. It do me a favor, put this bug in Whoopi's ear, okay? Tell her when she do that film, I want to be able to talk to her too, and get her on here too as well. Any and everybody that has any kind of pull to get the facts out there to help bring justice to Emmett Till and his family, let's try to make it happen the best way we know how. All right. Keith
Brother
Beauchamp.
Deontay, thank you so much for your time and the
Thank you.
platform, brother. I hope that next time when we do this, have the proper technology taken care of over here. But just thank you for the platform. Thank you, everyone, for listening in or waiting. I would love to come back anytime and have this talk with you, man. And hopefully the next time I'm on here, it'll be something great that we
Yeah.
can discuss. Like Carolyn Bryan is now in jail.
Yeah. Carolyn Bryan's there in jail. Keith Beauchamp, everybody. Keith Beauchamp, thank you so much for coming on here, taking time out of your schedule to be here and to talk with me. Listen, I know the internet connection, Keith was having a little bit of issues on his end with the network connection or what have you. But this episode is going to be up on my YouTube page. It's going to be up on my YouTube page. I'm gonna pull it up right here where y'all can follow me at Deontay Carroll right there. Deontay Carroll. Also, you want to make sure you follow me on Facebook at Deontay J. Carroll Sr. Also, follow me on Instagram at Deontay Carroll, all one word. Also, I'm also on Twitter. Follow me at Deontay J. Carroll, no apostrophe. We want to thank Keith Beauchamp. Keith, hang in there for a second. I'm going to close the show out and chat with you briefly before I get off of here. We thank Keith Beauchamp for coming to talk to us tonight about the story of Emmett Till. Y'all go look at his documentary, The Untold Story of Emmett Till. Listen, do what we can to bring justice. I know that happened in 1955 and it's 2021, but at the same time, it's never too late for justice. It's never too late. Emmett Till was 14 years old and that shouldn't have happened, and justice going unserved for this long should not be. But hey, but this is America. But nevertheless, as a community, as a people, we can come together and we can fight for justice. And it's a fight. We have a lot of work that we have to do. But not only are we going to pray, faith without works is dead, folks. And so we have to do what we have to do on our end to make sure that we're going to help Keith and help the family of Emmett Till out to seek justice. So thank you, Keith. I'm Deontay Carroll. I'm your host. And so please, until next time, do me a favor and keep that volume turned up. Peace.